Okay, here's step one, working on the 67 Camaro. We're actually going to sand this hood with some 150 so we can put some feather fill on it to make sure that thing's straight. And then once we're done that, we're going to start stripping some panels on this thing and getting those in epoxy. We're going to re-strip that roof, and we're going to dig the plastic out of this seam because it's just plastic. It was done quick, just to get it from one chop to the next. So that'll be the next step there. Get everything epoxied, and then we'll start doing body work. Okay, when I'm sanding for curves like this, and even though I'm going to block the hood later after I prime it, I still don't want to make any gouges with the edge of the DA. So I'll put an interface pad on it because it's kind of squishy. This way I can sand in there, and you can see how the paper will bend, so it's not as aggressive as the edge of the DA. So that'll make a nice dig mark in it. This won't, because it has that nice curve and it forms to it, and that's kind of how we use that. So now you can see how good it works on the corners and the rounded areas. Even works good on this curve because it basically forms right to that curve. Basically in here you're just going to do it, hand sand it. This centerpiece is going to get cut out later to cool off the engine, so this will end up being functional. And on the sides over here we'll still use a DA, but instead of having an interface pad, because we want to keep it flat, we're just going to keep the flat and make sure you have a nice good pad, because if it's got curves on the edges you're just going to have dig marks in it also. So just make sure you've got a nice flat pad and keep that flat all the way down as you sand it. And if there's any chips or what have you in there, you can come back later and fill those in with fiberglass or body filler. So stay tuned. Okay, so we have the hood sanded, and we also cut these out. First thing I did is I taped up the line where I wanted it, and then I took this drill and drilled a bunch of holes in on both sides, and then I reamed it out with this. And then to get that, I used the belt tool to get it even all the way across, just like that. So it's good to have a bunch of different tools to do the job. I could have used a Sawzall or a small saw to get that cut out, but that seemed to work better, that tool there, the belt tool. So there we go. Now we can prime that with some feather fill and then start blocking it out. Look for a crack in the Camaro hood here, so I just have some 900 or wax and grease remover, and you can't see that there's a crack there. So what you do is you take your blowgun and there's your crack. Now we got to fix that crack. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, here's the hood for the 67 Camaro, the race car that we got in. It was just about ready for primer yesterday until we washed it down with some wax and grease remover. And as we were blowing it off, we noticed that there was a crack right here. So we ground that out, fiberglassed it, and did some body work to it. So it'll be ready for primer today. We'll put some feather fill on it, block it out, and then we'll prime it. Stay tuned for that. 67 Camaro. We're stripping the body filler outside of the seam here. It's a good thing we did because they put body filler over the top of the E-coat, which doesn't even look sanded. It's just kind of peeling off, as you can see. So we'll be digging that out, putting a piece of metal in, welding it up solid, and then putting a skim coat of fiberglass over that, and then a skim coat of body filler. We gotta get that window out too. Okay, here's a 67 Camaro. We got all the body filler out of there. Had to wire brush the seam in here. We're gonna end up epoxying in there, epoxying this piece here, and then we're gonna weld this on there, and maybe weld this a little bit better, and then we're going to grind it smooth and put a skim coat of fiberglass over it, and then a skim coat, and then we'll epoxy that. After we strip the quarter panel, we'll epoxy everything, and then that's when we start doing body work. And I'll show you the other side too. Same thing here. We'll epoxy this, and then we'll put this piece on, weld it up, and then grind it down smooth. Okay, here's the 67 Camaro. I have pictures of these pieces being welded in. Got a nice skim coat of fiberglass on there. We started stripping the tops of the quarters, the deck lid, that panel there. We also did this side. Nice skim coat on there. We'll strip the roof, and then we'll epoxy the top half of the car, and then we'll strip the quarters. We got to take that bumper off and do some fixing of this tail light here before we strip any of that. So we're going to fix that. It's just hitting on the bracket on the inside, so we'll cut the bracket and re-weld it. And it's got a gap here too. We'll figure out that one. So that's next on the list for the 67. Okay, we're back on the 67 Camaro. We got the windshield out, started stripping the roof, got the rear window out, stripped back half of the car. We're gonna get ready for some epoxy here pretty soon, as we're done stripping the roof. And then we're gonna move on to melting lead out and welding that up with sheet metal. And we'll be stripping the A-pillar post in a minute, cleaning this up. That was barely held on. You can see how it wasn't really sticking because it was never primed. But we're moving on it. So for me to get this tail light to fit on the 67 Camaro, I had to cut this to move that forward, and now I actually have to cut this whole bracket all the way across there to move that back, because the tail light, the holes are hitting here and this can't move back anymore. So I got to cut all that, move that back, weld it back up to make that tail light fit correctly. This is how the tail light fits to the tail pan, because it's hitting those brackets. So I got to move that bracket back that far. So time to get to cutting. Here's the passenger side. Okay, it's all taped up for epoxy, sanded down with 80 grit. Tail pan's all sanded and taped up. We're going to next wash it down with the Glazert 360-4 metal cleaner. And before we do that, we're going to take some extra precaution and grind the inside of those drip rails there just in case there's anything left. And we'll get to epoxying. Okay, here's the 67 Camaro. It's all been stripped down, epoxied, 2 coats of epoxy. So now we can start attacking some bodywork on it. We have some dents to get out of it. We'll hammer and dolly those. Let that cure. Start blocking it out for some bodywork and getting ready to go do some bodywork on that. And then we got to line up doors and fenders and that hood. The hood we put some feather fill on today, so there's that. So we'll block that out, and if we need to do some body work to it, we'll do body work to it and get it primed up. So stay tuned.